But I absolutely think that these human skills in the age of AI and transformation, technology change, they are the most valuable skills that anyone can have, and they have absolute ripple effects. So, we're talking curiosity, that empathy, being able to communicate effectively in a way that aligns with your own natural style, but to also recognize where that misalignment exists with other people. So, recognizing if you have a different communication style, what's the other person's, how can you meet them where they are? They're all actually great coaching skills, but they are such great skills for building really collaborative relationships across an organization.
Mm.
And a lot of the time, when I was saying this to somebody last week, that the connection you are going to get with your key stakeholder is not within your procurement strategy. It's in the conversation that you have with that person to understand their world and to sort of get on board with them, like how you can find that common ground with somebody.
Thank you so much for joining another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, I have the great pleasure of being joined by Laura and Donna, two wonderful procurement career coaches and procurement coaches, and they have teamed up to create Procurement Pivots. And when two people are passionate about something and they get together to go make it exponentially that much better, it is so, so cool to see. I can't wait to get into this with both of you. Laura and Donna, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thank you for inviting us on. We're very excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, welcome. Thank you.
Well, I am delighted that there are people that are out there that are helping guide, helping coach, right? On this never-ending climb, it's sometimes difficult to make sense of, do I turn left or do I turn right? Now, a coach isn't going to tell you which way to turn, but they can help you go through the process of helping figure that out. And what led the two of you into this path? How did you get into procurement, and how did you begin coaching senior procurement professionals?
Do you want to go first, Laura?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, yeah, thanks again for having us, Sean. So my journey started about 13 years ago. I was working in-house at a public sector procurement organisation in the UK. And my roles were quite varied across that time that I was there for about 9 years. But towards the end of that time that I was there, we were in the times of COVID. And I was actually leading on a lot of initiatives for employee engagement. And we had lots of buyers who were on the front line of working with the front line of procurement, working with the NHS, our beloved National Health Service, trying to source equipment such as ventilators. And we had some team members who were there working from home, being stuck at home in lockdown with children and trying to manage a full-time job, and others who were living alone and feeling quite isolated. So my step into coaching was around how can I support these people better in a way that's tailored to what they need, because every individual is different. And I really did enjoy that element of supporting procurement professionals. And so I trained as a coach, set up my business, and ended up working with quite a few different procurement professionals across various sectors. So that was my journey. How about you, Donna?
So mine, I guess mine is a different background. So I've been helping people in their careers, professionals, for over 25 years, so showing my age. And so the second half of, I guess, my kind of career-focused career was stepping into the procurement space. So a bit like lots of people in procurement, I wouldn't say I fell into procurement, but I was invited in. So I was internally headhunted to head up a procurement recruitment team in the recruitment business that I was working in. But I guess as a leader, I'd been kind of informally coaching, mentoring my own team for years and years, but also the senior procurement leaders that I was supporting to move into roles. And so, just a few years ago, I just stopped to ask myself some of those big, important questions. What do I want for my life? And how do I want my work to fit in? And actually, what is it that I most love doing? And I think that happened at a time that I was seeing lots and lots of senior procurement professionals finding things really difficult, often the most kind of challenging period in their career to date. I think we've been in this marketplace over the last few years where it has become much harder, I think, internally when you're working in roles. And I'm sure we're going to touch on some of this today. But, there's often a lot more pressure, greater expectation, fewer resources, and there've been fewer opportunities. So I think people are finding it much harder to progress internally. And then when we look at the external job market, we've had this perfect storm of fewer opportunities and significantly higher levels of great procurement leaders available on the marketplace. So I think I saw people really starting to struggle, often for the first time in their procurement career, struggling to progress internally, struggling to step into roles externally, and I knew that I could help. So I decided to kind of exit my corporate career and set up my coaching business, and that was 2 years ago.
Congratulations to both of you, because speaking from some experience, it was 13 years ago I'd started my business, and it is a wonderful adventure. I invite anyone that has not considered this to think about how running a business is one of the most intensive personal development programs on the planet.
Absolutely.
And it is a wonderful, wonderful adventure. The things that we learn about ourselves that we can then go forth to help others with are really, really powerful. And I think the longer somebody has led and built and grown a business, the more personal development they've needed to undertake. This is one of those questions sometimes people find is they are thinking about their career. What do they want to do? And I can think about somebody like a Tom Mills, who has done such a tremendous job, like you, struck out on his own. I'm sure with a certain degree of anxiety around what that meant and how does it all work and so on, and yet creating the conditions for success. And I think this is one of those wonderful things of, for some people, that entrepreneurial path is attractive, but perhaps not right for them for any variety of reasons. And for some people, it can be. As I understand it, the two of you are mainly helping folks that are on a path internally to go and grow their career. Is that right?
Well, I guess we both support people in slightly different ways. So with my own private work, so just to kind of mention, so we both run our own coaching practices, and then we've come together as Procurement Pivots. So Procurement Pivots is our joint collaboration that we've launched as well. But a lot of my work is centred around navigating some kind of job move, either internally within an organisation or externally. I think you made a comment earlier about, sometimes people are at this path, do I turn left, do I turn right? Actually, two options. A lot of the people I work with, they describe themselves at a crossroad, and often it's many more options that they're considering than just two. So a lot of what I'm doing is kind of supporting people, helping them to really understand what they need to understand about themselves in order to make that right next decision, and then particularly supporting them with how to successfully position themselves in an increasingly competitive marketplace. Because right now, if you can't differentiate yourself, you're probably not going to even see the most exciting opportunities, and you're not going to be considered for them. So it's about really understanding how can you articulate that kind of value proposition so that it resonates with the right people.
And that it feels right to you. And I think that inner work is the part that it often takes a coach to help hold up a mirror. Laura, what would you add to this?
Yeah, I think I really like what you were saying around the building a business thing, because I actually work a lot with procurement leaders who are building out a function, or they're taking their function to new heights in their organisation. And a lot of the time, I actually can draw comparisons about how taking procurement to new heights in your organisation is like building a business. You need to be good at the marketing and to selling the story. To be a good storyteller, you need to be able to wear so many different hats. And so a lot of the work that I do is helping somebody to establish themselves and their influence with their key stakeholders, and navigating a lot of power dynamics and politics as well is something that comes up quite a lot in conversation. So I help them to build the tools to be able to do that, while also maintaining their sense of well-being and resilience. So I think, going back to the the starting a business thing. I do actually work with some clients who are also running their own businesses in the procurement space. And I think what I love about procurement and supporting these professionals is that there's so much opportunity, in
Yeah.
terms of how you want to show up as a procurement leader, how you want to build your function. If you're
Yeah.
working in public sector, if you're working in private sector, if you are a global procurement function, you have to have a really good sense of where you want to take that team to and what you want to be known for within the organisation. So I think there's a lot of crossover between Donna and I in terms of how we help, but I guess we might help at different stages of the journey as well. But we make a great team between the twists and turns and the ups and downs of a procurement professional's career.
But I think I'd also add, we're talking about kind of setting up a business, but I see a lot of comparison actually with people approaching their careers, because I think when people are setting up businesses, they've got really clear on what's important to them, how they want to show up, what they want to focus on. But I think you can do the same within your career and within your corporate career. And I think so many people leave their career decisions to chance. A lot of people kind of, share this with me. Often they're starting to think now more intentionally about their career for the first time ever. And some of them, they're 25, maybe 30 years into their career. But actually, I think when you really lean into what it is you're really, really good at and what it is you actually love doing, even in your professional corporate career, like that can open so many different avenues. It's not just about, okay, I now need to take this and, go and set up my own business. But it's like, actually, however we choose to work, how can you spend as much of your time as possible on kind of activities that feel rewarding and where you genuinely feel like you're having the impact that you want to have. And that is possible for every single person. But right now, not everyone is working in that way. And so many people are, they're stuck in roles that they're just not enjoying anymore and they're not serving them. So I think that's, like, we love to talk about clarity. And, I think that's the big thing about working with a coach. As you say, it's holding up that mirror, but really helping people to ask themselves the right questions and answer those questions so that they get really, really clear on actually what's most important to me now, and how can I build an environment at work where I'm happy more of the time.
There's something really powerful about the sense of surrender that I know some people take to their career of, don't worry, my mentor, my boss, whoever has my best interests in mind, and they kind of surrender to or abdicate this idea of where they're going, that there's some larger career development program that they subscribe to and that they just kind of go with the flow through it. I think though people, and you're probably finding this too, that are the most satisfied, that leave the world significantly better than they found it, are the ones that live their life by design, not by default. And they're clear about what that means to them and why it matters to them. There's such a tremendous amount of work that somebody needs to do. They really do need a good coach, like, the two of you, to help them go through that. It is very difficult to do that from within the confines of one's own mind. And I think because of that, there are career mistakes, right, that people run into. In so many cases, when somebody is going with the flow and they're kind of taking it by default, or whatever that next move is, they resign or they just kind of accept whatever that might be. There's a whole host of career mistakes that go with that, where I imagine there are people that end up in a role where perhaps the Peter principle has kicked in and they are, outside of their range, or they're just stuck doing something they dislike, or they're just really in a role that they find spectacularly unfulfilling. What do you see as some of those career mistakes, and what advice would you have for somebody to help them navigate through that? And then, when would they recognize, when should they kind of go, if this is true, I need to call Laura or Donna?
Great question. So, I think particularly over the last few years, we're seeing more of this. We're seeing more people step into environments or be in environments that don't feel aligned. And I think, particularly in a market that is challenged, often when people feel like they need to make a move, they're forced to make a move, or they want to make a move, I think if you haven't taken that time to really work out, who am I? What's most important to me right now? And what are those key factors that I need to thrive, not just to survive, but to thrive? So, we both do a lot of work around values, core values. What are those things that are most important to me, that if it's not in place, it's going to feel really off kilter. And I think, many people make quite rushed decisions, in my view. I think we've been in a market where some people, there's a big kind of scarcity mindset right now. The market's not very strong. There's not lots of opportunities. Many people are accepting that first offer that comes along. And I think many people kind of, when they're thinking about a move, sometimes they don't take that step back, first of all. And for me, when you're thinking, okay, I think I might be ready for a move, step one for me is not dust down the CV and update it. It's actually take stock, take a moment just to pause and work out, what is it that's most important, and what do you want that move to actually look like? And I think often people, they'll scratch the surface, but they won't go deep enough to really understand those factors. And so then when they're considering opportunities, often they're not asking enough of the right questions to ascertain, is it truly aligned or not? So, we're seeing a lot of this. People think, right, I want a more strategic role. They'll go into an interview process. The business is talking about strategy. Brilliant. But actually, how do they know that their definition of strategic is the same as the business's? And I think this is where we see quite a lot of misalignment. If you don't challenge that conversation and ascertain, are we talking about the same thing? It's the same word, but does it mean the same thing? If you're not asking those types of questions, then often when you step into that environment, you're like, oh, this is a bit different to what I was expecting. But I think...
What is... This word does not mean what you think it means when you say a strategic role.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's one of the common ones that we see. I think a lot of procurement leaders, they're frustrated. They're in the weeds, they're firefighting, they're problem solving. They're being told you need to be strategic, but they're being dragged into the operation all of the time. And so for many people, that is a big part of their reason for looking elsewhere. And I think sometimes you can just hear those buzzwords that you want to hear. But my advice would be just really, take the time to explore together. Do we mean that's the same thing? What would you add, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, when Sean, you mentioned about these career mistakes, I smiled because I often talk about career ghosts and about how they can hold us back. So sometimes we might view them as a mistake, but sometimes they're just something that holds us back from being the leaders that we can be, from having the influence that we want to have, from making the decisions that we want to make next and create that career by design that you were talking about. So I think in terms of the mistakes, a lot of the work that I like to do is around the reframing around conversations, around what that means for a new decision, because I also think that certain doors open when others close. And so to be able to position yourself, like Donna says, for the next decision, to have our eyes open to different ways of doing things, also comes up quite a lot in the work that coaching can provide. But and I think, any career ghost, as again, to use the term that I like to throw at it, is like, what am I going to learn from this so that I can take control the next time? Because I think, as procurement as a profession continues to evolve, there's a lot of spinning plates that need to happen. There's a lot of the time it feels like the ground is moving beneath us quite quickly. And so I also like to think that working with a coach can really help you to gain some control back and to sort of get some firm footing underneath you when you're dealing with that evolving profession and these mistakes or ghosts.
I think as well, just on that, I think, the world that we're in, as I've said, has been really challenging. And, lots of people, for various different reasons, they're questioning everything, the world that we're in, the profession that they've chosen, the company that they're in. But actually often as well, I think there are a lot of procurement leaders starting to question their own ability. Is it me? Is it me? That can happen quite quickly. And I think when you're looking to make a really important big career decision, if you're making it from a place of kind of, lacking confidence, or your confidence has eroded, it makes it much harder for you to make those decisions, to take action, but to make the right decisions as well. I think sometimes the decisions made when, when you're not feeling at your most confident, they're not going to be the most confident decisions. They might be too safe, they might not be bold enough decisions. And actually, I think that again is where sometimes people find themselves in environments where they're not challenged. There isn't the growth opportunity because they've gone for what they were comfortable they could do, as opposed to where they really truly wanted to be. And so I think again, the work that you do with a coach, a big part of that is kind of helping individuals to really understand where are their gaps, and where can they and should they look to build their own self-belief and confidence, so that they can then go on to make big, bold decisions about their career, but feel that they're able to do that.
Something that just on as you're describing career ghosts, I can think back 20, 21 years ago, and there was a fork in the road when I was working for a large transportation company. I might move cities to go work in operations, to go really understand how the business worked and actually go run trains. Or I might go and work in internal audit. Now, I don't know if the two of you have ever had the impression of I'm here from internal audit, I'm here to help, is one of those sentences that tends to inspire fear, right?
I led an internal audit recruitment business, so I understand internal audit really well. Yeah.
Either path were viable, and either path would have provided a tremendous opportunity to learn. Very long story short, I ended up not moving cities, but going to work for somebody who ultimately ended up being one of my favorite leaders ever, Bill. And in a delightful small world, he was the chief internal auditor at this Fortune 500 company. I had the great privilege after he retired to bring him in as my part-time CFO for a few years as he was getting into retirement. So anyway, beautiful circle of life, kind of call it a ghost in the career, right? But that idea of going outside of a key function to go and learn about the part of the business, to learn about what really matters, right? I often talk about digging deep to understand what really matters. And sometimes that's very difficult to do if you're always within the support function. And so there's this concept that some organizations have of kind of a line job, and different organizations have different words for it, and then a support job. And procurement is almost always a support job or a support function. And when somebody who has only been in a support function goes out and does a line job for a while, the empathy, the understanding, the richness of what really matters, as in just instant understanding, is so powerful. And so I love to encourage people to seek out those opportunities, because they could end up being a ghost, but they could also be one of the most brilliant opportunities that shape so much of how you look at everything else for the rest of your career. And I think that being open to those opportunities is really, really powerful, because they are probably not the default. And I know that with so many changes in technology, time, geopolitics, everything else, these are all things that there's so much transformation and pressure going on, that there are skills that are more timeless, that really help separate leaders that are successful and move things forward from those that get stuck. Maybe Laura, if we start with you, what would you offer as your thoughts and wisdom?
Yeah, I think they're great points as well. And when you were talking about that empathy that you get from seeing the other side of things, like we were talking about curiosity earlier today, weren't we, Donna, about how valuable it is as a skill. And it's actually a really core coaching skill as well. We're very much trained to notice what we would call door handle moments that people say, where they're having a conversation about their career, then they'll say something that they sort of dismiss, and we're like, oh, hold on, let's just go look at that for a second, and bring that back in, because that might be relevant. And often it opens another door of possibility. But I absolutely think that these human skills in the age of AI and transformation, technology change, they are the most valuable skills that anyone can have, and they have absolute ripple effects. So, we're talking curiosity, that empathy, being able to communicate effectively in a way that aligns with your own natural style, but to also recognize where that misalignment exists with other people. So, recognizing if you have a different communication style, what's the other person's, how can you meet them where they are? They're all actually great coaching skills, but they are such great skills for building really collaborative relationships across an
Mm.
organization. And a lot of the time, when I was saying this to somebody last week, that the connection you are going to get with your key stakeholder is not within your procurement strategy. It's in the conversation that you have with that person to understand their world and to sort of get on board with them, like how you can find that common ground with somebody. And I think, in the age of AI and technology, these core skills will serve you so much for the future and will take your career to a different level, in my view.
Mm. Yeah. I think I'd add as well, I think successful procurement leaders and procurement professionals, like, they have such an amazing array of talent and these softer skills that are so transferable and so incredibly valuable to so many other parts of the organization. And like, me and Laura talk about the opportunity mindset quite a bit on our podcast. I think sometimes it's very difficult to see the opportunity in an organisation beyond your team or your department, but actually, we see so many great examples of where procurement are utilising their capability and their value, and they're taking it outside of the function, either as a permanent step out, or, as you say, Sean, I think it can be so valuable, kind of, going out into the business for a period of time and then coming back, and actually the difference in those people that have done both, like, they are just able to deliver at just a very different level. And I
Yeah.
think, there's some, many very successful global organisations that, they will only allow their leaders at certain levels to step into roles if they have experienced multiple parts of the organisation. It's almost a prerequisite for some of those board level positions. Like, you need to have experienced more than just one area, because that is going to be much more valuable. So yeah, I think often when people are feeling stuck, I think sometimes it's hard to see how they can utilise their skill set. But actually, it's, the skills that you have as a successful procurement professional, your relationship building, your influence, your curiosity, your ability to actually, like, solve problems and challenges in areas that you've probably not operated in before, like your ability to just pick things up very quickly and ask the right questions. I think it comes back to that. You don't always have to be that subject matter expert, but you need to understand what are some of those questions that you need to ask in order to understand enough to get to the root cause of the challenges and dig deeper than the surface level noise that is flying around everywhere, but really understand, like, what's the heart of the challenge here and how can we help you to solve those challenges, and that's really valuable elsewhere.
Yeah. A couple of themes that I know are often brought up of procurement looking for a seat at the table, and procurement looking to get better at telling stories, and procurement looking to be an enabler, and thinking about enterprise thinking. And there's so many different frames and lenses of it. The leaders that it sounds like you're seeing the same thing. The leaders that are the most effective at it can go from the boardroom to the shop floor to the receiving dock to, wherever it is in the organization. And they've done the work to go and understand what that really is, what that feels like, and what matters to them, so that they can speak to them in a way that really matters, in a way that resonates. Because procurement often ends up getting so inwardly focused of our policies, and supply chain can get so stuck on, well, why doesn't the business understand that, only having a 1 day or 1 hour buffer at that point in the supply chain leaves all this variability out the other end. Or, why procurement is, talking about sourcing events and things like this, that these are not the words that the rest of the business uses. So breaking
Yeah.
out of the language and starting to tell the stories and speak in a way that matters, that shows that we really understand from a supply chain what matters to a COO, what matters to a CFO. Why is
Mm.
inventory so important? What does lead time variability, et cetera? You know, if lead time was a day, of course, it'd be really easy. You know, it'd be instant, but that's not true.
Mm.
So creating that foundational understanding and that generalist, right? I think that's the other piece of Donna, Laura, you're both in your own way. I'm hearing you talk about how becoming better rounded and developing some of those generalist skills make anybody so much more valuable to an organization. And Donna, you were talking about some organizations require that
Yeah.
at certain levels.
hmm
High five to them,
Absolutely.
Mm.
because it creates and reinforces the conditions for executives who genuinely get it. And by
Yeah.
it, I don't just mean the one function that they're responsible
Yeah.
for, but rather how it
Yeah.
drives and supports a stronger supply chain overall. I
Yeah.
think this is really, really powerful. So I love seeing more leaders out there helping create more leaders that reinforce and bring this. One of my
Mm.
favorite questions, and this is something that I am passionate about, is, you know, what do you wish you could tell yourself, or, you know, other leaders, emerging leaders that are maybe like you 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that you know would serve them? And then one of my other favorite additions is, you know, and what are you doing to be the person that you would have listened to?
Mm.
Oh, what
Yeah,
questions? Such
I
good
wish we'd
question.
had this one in advance. I think it's a really great question. I think for me, um, I'd been supporting everyone else in their career and actually hadn't really, for a very long time, kind of checked in on myself in my career. And I think I genuinely, and I smile when I say this because Laura's heard me say this before, I think, but I think anything is possible for people. I think, the world feels tough right now, and many people feel like, this is what I do, this is what I've always done, this is what I always have to do. And I don't believe that at all. Like, the world of work has changed enormously. Yes, there are many people still in very traditional corporate linear career paths, and that's great if it's serving you and if it's working well, but that isn't the only way. And I think I would just say, like, my advice to anyone, kind of what I've learned for myself and what I support my clients with now, is just try and create some time in this busy world that you're living in to actually reflect on what am I really good at and what do I love doing, and how can I essentially build a career around those things, and really keep in sight of what's important, and just checking in with yourself from time to time to ask yourself, like, is this still serving me? What do I need in order to enjoy what I'm doing even more? And again, I think, so many people have, had a session today with a client who has come to me for an external move, and we've dug deep, what's important, what are her values? And actually, I'm like, well, let's look at where you are. Like I'm not saying, it's not for me to say whether you do or don't move, but let's explore how could you actually enjoy your current environment more. And for her, it kind of blew her mind a bit today. She hadn't really thought about how can I improve some of these things that are frustrating me. That would be my kind of advice to people. Just get really, really, really clear, if you can, on what you do well, which can be uncomfortable, what do you love doing, what gives you energy, and try and think about, okay, with that combination, what could that look like in different environments? And then, I regularly now check in on, how am I feeling, what am I enjoying, what am I not, how can I adapt it? And I think that's equally applicable in an employed career as it is in your own business.
I 100% agree with that. And there's something really powerful about something that you brought up there. If somebody is in an environment and there's some things that are frustrating to them, and some of those things are within perhaps control or perhaps strong influence that they can go to move or shift those things so they work better. If that person switches roles and goes to another organization, but they haven't done the work to become the person that is ready to go and deal with those frustrations, then those same things are just going to follow them and follow them
Yeah.
and follow them
Yeah.
and follow them. And so breaking that cycle and
Yeah.
creating that hard question of, hey, what would happen if you dealt with those things here? And how much better would that be? Has a compounding effect
Yeah.
on both them, everybody else around them, how they feel, and the impact that they're able to have in their organization too.
Absolutely.
Those are really powerful things. And I think that is a rare and wonderful gift. So thank you, Donna, for sharing that.
No worries.
Laura, what would you add? And I know we've just got a couple of minutes and we'll land the plane here today.
Yeah, no, I love what you shared just then, Sean, because I say this a lot to clients. Like, if we don't look at these things that you can control now, they will show up for you wherever you go. Like, I don't know if you know the phrase that wherever you go, there you are, because you take yourself
Yeah.
with you. So, I would definitely say, in terms of what I would say to my younger self, is like, you don't need to know all the answers, and not everybody has all the answers. You've got to be able to be comfortable being uncomfortable by stepping out of your comfort zone and taking that one step, and trusting that one step is all you need right now, with the end in mind. But we can't wait for things to be perfect. You could, like, we go back
Yeah.
to the beginning of this conversation with starting a business. If you were to wait until you had everything lined up in your business, you'd be waiting forever. You'd never actually start day one. So I think it's certainly something that I like to share with clients around that, and that waiting for perfect. And so what I also like to do in terms of, what I'm doing, to answer your second question, is that I think there is so much, the power of listening is massively underestimated. To be able to ask somebody a question and listen properly to the answer, to actively listen, because you learn so much about people and about what's really important to them, to build conversations. And just also to remind people that they don't have to do it on their own, because I am a hugely independent person. I think you have to have a sense of independence to run your own business, but to learn that when you're learning the ropes in leadership, and as procurement continues to evolve as well, that you don't have to do it on your own. And whether that is with external help, or whether that's also making sure you've got your support circle lined up, and that looks different for each and every one of us. But yeah, they're probably two of the biggest lessons that I would say.
I know that there are a lot of people who would benefit from some advice and coaching from either one of you or both of you. And I hope that they can. I know you're easy to find on LinkedIn. When this goes, we'll be able to tag each other and so on the LinkedIn messages that get out with it. Just anybody listening on Spotify, what's the best way to find Laura and Donna?
Probably, like you say, on LinkedIn. So we're both on LinkedIn individually, but we have our Procurement Pivots page on LinkedIn as well. So we also run a podcast ourselves as well, the Procurement Pivots podcast. So yeah, I think LinkedIn is a great place to find either of us.
Brilliant. Well, I'm grateful to both of you for joining today, and for all of you watching. This has been another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so
you.
much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.